Myst is a journey across ages, and we've covered them in the past. But it's also the story of Atrus and his family, and his people, the Dunny. The stranger might be the main actor in most of the Myst titles, someone who found the Myst linking book and set on a journey of a lifetime and forged a friendship with a guy who can write books that literally create worlds. But the stranger is a faceless protagonist, and it's a stand-in for the player. It's merely an avatar. So to look at the Myst series and understand its events and twists, we need to do it from the point of view of Atrus. Let's talk about that. To understand Atrus and his family and their messed up priorities, we gotta look back a bit to how the whole mess started. We need to talk about the Dunny and about Anna, or as most will know her, Tiana, her Dunny name, given to her by her husband, Atrus, with an I after the A, the grandfather of the Atrus we meet in the games. For the sake of avoiding confusion, I'll be calling the one from the games Atrus and his grandfather Atrus, so it's clear who it is I'm referring to. One additional note, something that is critical from the point of view of a retrospective on the Myst series, and which I consider to be a significant issue, and one that has not been resolved or even mitigated with the recent remakes, is the fact that a lot of what I'm going to talk about is not in the games, but on novels and other fiction. There's also the fact that Uru contradicts a lot of what's established, given that the whole idea of Uru is that the Dunny are real, they're from Earth, and Cyan was given knowledge of them, which they used to make the game Myst, and in doing so took a bunch of creative liberties. I truly dislike the Uru changes, and so I just simply ignore them, and instead focus on the Myst titles themselves. And funnily enough, focusing on the mainline series is actually valid from an Uru point of view, as I'm choosing to look at the fiction and not reality. As much as I like Myst and the games by Cyan Worlds, Uru and the whole self-insert of Cyan into their lore feels like the video game version of getting high on your own supply. It feels like fanboy self-inserting. But anyway, let's start with Anna, a young girl from the surface who found her way through a network of caves to the capital of the Dunny, where she was, of course, promptly arrested and held, as Dunny civilization was aggressively xenophobic. The Dunny created worlds with their words, and then, as seen in Myst V, either plundered or conquered a lot of those ages, and even enslaved a race or two. The fact they're xenophobic is not only very appropriate, but makes it so they deserve everything that happened to them. And it's one of the reasons I always find it baffling how much everybody in the Myst series is so invested in rebuilding the civilization. The Dunny suck, and the fact they possess the art, the ability to write ages, is nowhere near enough of a reason to bring them back. Again, the Dunny, with very few exceptions, are just truly awful, and very much a society with a collective god complex. But back to Anna. She stays with the Dunny, and they place her in Atrus' home, and they eventually get together. And well, her values don't really mesh with the uptight and unfair Dunny society, so she starts being a bit of an activist, pushing some of her ideals, such as giving more power to the common folk. As you may expect from such an awful society, only the nobles had a good time. The rest of the populace didn't even have access to other ages for quite some time. The Dunny didn't just concentrate wealth and power with the nobility, but also the art itself. Remind me, why is everybody in this series obsessed with bringing these people back? Anna's presence causes some issues between Atrus and one of his closest friends, Viovis, who's even more of a xenophobe than the rest of the society combined. He blocks her from attending events, from going to certain ages, once she's given the freedom to do so, and even loses his lid when Atrus tells him that he's taught her the art. In fact, most do, until she proves she's quite brilliant at it, and so they kinda relax about it. Except Viovis, of course. She's an outsider, and so he's dead set against her. And when Atrus and she get together, well, that's the end of the friendship. Viovis starts to go off the deep end and strikes a partnership with a guy called Dagaris. A rebel, a terrorist, really. But Viovis has some reservations about the guy. He's got a bad reputation. So Dagaris goes to some bonkers lengths to make sure this guy is completely on board with anything. He frames him for murder and gets him sent to a prison age, but has a backdoor into that age to provide a timely rescue, and in doing so make himself the only person Viovis can trust and fully alienate him from everyone else. And right now you're hearing this and thinking this is some 5D chess move, but here's where it falls apart. The original plan from the council was for Viovis to be executed, but the only reason that doesn't happen is because Anna steps in and speaks in his favor, saying, hey, he's not a bad guy, he's just misguided. And so they decide to imprison him instead. And then Agaris gets the linking book to get him out of prison. But if Anna doesn't step in, Viovis just goes pining for the fjords, and the conspiracy ends there. And so I just see the entire thing as something of a plot hole. Like it was written to fit together, but not as a logical sequence of events. There is no logic in Agaris framing him if it's gonna get him killed. And there's nothing to establish that he knew Anna would speak on his behalf. After all, he's been nothing but horrible to her. Anyway, when Viovis escapes, he's now fully convinced that the outsiders have contaminated Dunny's society and he needs to be purged. Because that's the conclusion you get to from someone saving your story behind from certain execution. Viovis and Agaris go full umbrella and release a virus across not only the Dunny capital, but all of their ages, to ensure that none could escape. And then Agaris tells his compatriot to write a new age for the two of them where they could rule as gods. And this, not the genocide, but this, the creation of a new age they can rule, is the line that Viovis won't cross, because it's a misuse of the art. And so he rejects the proposal and Agaris kills him. Don't know what kind of plan he had next, because at this point he'd be kinda screwed. But we never know what could have happened, because Atrus sacrifices himself to draw Agaris into a death book, similar to a trap book that links to a place without an exit, but the world itself is a death trap. Anna and her boy Ghen manage to escape to the surface from whence she came, and she stays in the cleft, inside that dormant volcano in New Mexico, where she first found the entrance to the Dunny lands. Ghen, for his part, very much loved his dad, the Dunny, the art, and all of that, and so of course, he blames his mom for everything that happened. He parts ways with her as soon as he can, and goes on his merry way to both try to learn more of his heritage, perfect his technique of the art, as his education on it had barely started when the whole fall of the Dunny happened, and then spend some time in the surface with a tribe that seemed to have some connection with the Dunny, and he met and married a woman there, Kata. Kata went into labor and it was a rough one, so despite his animosity and knowing how much of a good healer she was, Ghen took his wife to the cleft, so Anna could help with the delivery. The baby was fine, but Kata passed, another thing that Ghen counted as one of his mother's sins. So he disappeared once more and left the baby with her, having no interest in the child without the mother. Anna named the boy Atrus, and yeah, this is the Atrus we meet in the Myst games. Anna raised him as her own and provided him with a loving childhood and instilled in him something that Ghen, being full Dunny, never actually got: a moral compass and knowing right from wrong. Then one day Ghen pops again and takes him to the 5th age. Ghen didn't really give names to the ages he made. He gave them numbers. And that should tell you all you need to know about how he viewed the worlds and the people within them. But if it's not clear, he saw those living in the ages as beneath him, not real people. You see, one of the aspects of the art that was never taught to him was that cosmological thing I mentioned in the previous video, that the art doesn't create new worlds, but merely creates a view into something that already exists. Instead, he thought the ages he wrote didn't exist until he came up with them. And so his skills with the art kinda sucked. His ages were all unbalanced and decayed over time. Age 5, aka Riven, was the first that was more or less stable, and that would only be for a little while before signs appeared that it was, well, going away. Ghen took some of the locals and created a twisted version of the Dunny Guild, making them write passages from books, copying them, without actually telling them they were really copying descriptive and linking books. He brought Atrus in and taught him the art, and despite his talent for it, he insisted on doing his own thing and writing his own way. And Ghen, ever the controlling tyrant, didn't approve, and so he moved on to another candidate he could possibly mold into the perfect pupil. One of those locals was just better than the rest, and Ghen took her in, Catherine, and taught her the art. She and Atrus eventually got together, and then she and Anna wrote the Myst Age together as a place that they could live in, away from Ghen. By this time, the first signs of decay had already manifested on Riven, a fissure into time and space. Atrus and Catherine destroyed all of Ghen's linking books and his materials to make new ones, and then used the Myst linking book at the edge of the fissure, linking to that age and making it so the book fell down the crack, which is how the book eventually got into the hands of the stranger, aka the player, in the Myst game. But this isn't where the Myst game picks up. There's still a bit more to go, but this is actually the crux of the story. Atrus and Catherine have a couple of young boys and raise them on Myst Island. Cyrus, with the scientific mind of his father, has something of a lack of confidence but a whole lot of pride. And Achenar, good with his hands but difficulty in expressing his emotions properly. At first, it was all fine. They lived on the island, but then around the time Cyrus was 8, Anna had an accident in one of Catherine's ages and died. This event pretty much broke the family and precipitated everything else that followed. Atrus immersed himself obsessively into his experiments with the art, with the ages, and left their boys with their mother for days and weeks on end. Catherine, for her own part, never wrote another age, guilty that one of hers had caused Anna's death. And even when Atrus did take the boys with him on his expeditions, and even set up their lessons in the art with Jananin and the lesson ages seen in Myst III, Catherine remained behind. She didn't travel anywhere. So the boys spent most of their time with each other and on their own, rather than with their parents. And instead of being a present parent and teacher, Atrus just created ages and used them to provide the lessons. He intended to be a different teacher than his father was to him, and so he wished to instill in the boys the principles of the art, but he was nervous about actually teaching them. But in the process of it all, he forgot he had a much more important job: to be their dad, teach them about life and right from wrong, to give them what Anna gave to him in his own childhood, a family. And Catherine, between her misplaced guilt and her own homesickness having to abandon Riven, she just closed off, perhaps suffering from depression and just not being present enough to actually be a parent. When Atrus did take the boys out on expeditions or to other ages, they didn't see their mother for weeks, so it's no surprise that the boys didn't really care about their parents. And instead of understanding the lessons Atrus meant to teach them with the ages, they saw it all as pointless and didn't understand the message. And to be fair, only Atrus could have deciphered what the lessons were about in those school ages. His method of educating his sons was profoundly obtuse, and anyone would have seen all the tests and puzzles as just games, or even worse, something, well, truly pointless. And given that Atrus took them to places where they were viewed as gods, or as superior at the very least, is it surprising that they didn't think twice about plundering and conquering these places? They were gods, after all. The creatures of the ages were just there for them. Now, that isn't to say Cyrus and Achenar were not twisted in some way from the get-go. Destroying all the ages, killing everything there and taking all the ridges, plotting to kill their father and even send their mother back to Riven, all of these actions are the product of very disturbed minds. But Atrus and Catherine's absence in their formative years and the truly baffling ways Atrus chose to teach them are also contributing factors, especially as the kids likely saw that distance and absence as rejection. Catherine herself even reflects on this in one of her journals we find in Tomana years later. So the boys never properly learned what they were supposed to, and even came to resent their parents and instead followed their worst instincts, which included heading to Mechanical and striking a deal with the pirates in that world to bring them around the different ages for conquest, and of course trapping their father on Kavir. Unfortunately for them, eventually they fell into Atrus' trap books. Then we get to Myst. In that first game, we can release one of the two brothers, or in the canon ending, we release Atrus, whose next action is to burn the trap books, ensuring the two boys have no means of escape. You even see the scorch marks where the books used to be. Interesting bit is that before Myst IV kinda confirmed that the red and blue books in Myst linked to the prison ages we see in that game, the general assumption was that Atrus had killed the boys, as no one knew what burning the books actually did. In the events of Riven then, Atrus sends us into the eponymous age with 2 missions: take Catherine out and imprison Ghen in another trap book. And when we're done, Riven is very much destroyed, its people settling in a new age, and Ghen getting a permanent place in Atrus' library, where he remains until the end of his days, I suppose, because he's never mentioned or heard from again. After Riven, the next 3 games dive deeper into the crimes of Atrus' children. But most importantly for this discussion is that we get to see the lesson worlds that Atrus wrote and prepared for his kids so they could learn about the art. And even before Saavedro, the antagonist of Myst III, co-opted them for his own revenge, there was no way in hell that anyone, least of all 2 kids, would have figured out any lessons in these ages. And worst thing, even if they did manage to pick up what Atrus was putting down, the lessons were about the principles of age writing, of the art. There is nothing that would inform them of morality or make them care about the worlds. The only thing Atrus would have taught them is how to write ages properly, but nothing about, hey, these are real people. We create versions of existing places, but the people in them are very much like us. Hell, the last lesson world is Narayan, where once again, they were given the VIP treatment, and the only reward the kids got for solving all the puzzles is another lesson. This one on how this particular world works. Atrus even left them there to learn the local customs for days and weeks on end. By the time they left, they very much resented the entire experience, and I don't blame them. Even as a player, it feels like a whole lot of hoops for nothing. And while I do understand the principles that he sought to teach, there's nothing there to prevent them from becoming people like Ghen, or the people they would turn out to be. So of course, given their negative feelings about Narayan, it's no surprise they made it one of their first stops in their tour to mess up all the ages their father had created. They came in as gods and told them they didn't need to tend to their world tree anymore, that they could live freely. They stoked the tensions between the younger and older generations until it sparked a civil war, at which point they stole everything that wasn't nailed to a wall and booked it out, literally. And when Saavedro came to them begging for help, they laughed in his face and left him stranded in another world. Again, Sirius and Akinar were not good people. They had issues. But Myst III proves once more that Atrus sucked at parenting and at mentoring. He chose the worst ways to teach, and his obsession with exploring and experimenting with the art is likely the reason he chose these methods, with which he wouldn't need to be present. It's the Myst equivalent of giving your kids a tablet and having them learn with that instead of being part of their education. Well, by the time of Myst III, Catherine and Atrus have another kid, Yisha, and she's very much the second chance for the couple, and instead of being absentee parents, they're very much involved in her life and are there to teach her, stimulate her mind, reward her curiosity, and in general do everything they didn't do with Sirius and Akinar. Yisha is a sweet kid, bright and cheerful and very empathetic, as is proven during a journey to one of Catherine's ages, Serenia, where Yisha becomes one of the Guardians, a member of an order that protects the memory chamber in that world, a temple-like structure where a strange plant takes the dead and absorbs their memories, sending them into the dream world and returning them to the living in some form of container holding those memories. Yisha even gets a necklace that allows her to read the memories left in certain places, which is how she discovers that Catherine had not written an age since Anna's death. Serenia and the memory thing and even the necklace all break Atrus' head. He doesn't get it. He tries to explain it in a scientific manner, but in the end, like all the ages created by Catherine, it's all mystical nonsense to him, even though it's all real. Around this time, Atrus also begins his work in rebuilding the Dunny, even going on trips to relearn all the lessons of the art, to write Relition, the age for the Dunny survivors, a new beginning, taking only the best parts of the original civilization and leaving all the bad things behind. Though, given that the civilization as a whole has a massive god complex, I don't think there's much good in there. Case in point, Atrus is very much presented, at first, as the anti-Ghen. He doesn't have that godlike view of himself, except when you read his plans for the Dunny survivors and what he wants for the age he's writing, he comes across as yet another Dunny, thinking like there's some form of divinity. He writes that he wants the Dunny to struggle, to overcome hardship, to thrive and evolve, and so he's writing the age using the required principles to ensure that's what happens. He's writing the age already planning what he wants the Dunny to become in the future. And if that's not someone playing God, I don't know what is. And to me, it just proves that moral compass aside, Atrus has the same God complex every Dunny eventually succumbs to. But back to the family history. With Yisha as a teen and with all the time that has passed, Catherine and Atrus start discussing what to do about their two sons, and whether it's time to release them from their prison ages. As, maybe they've reformed. Atrus creates the Myst equivalent of a prison visitation room in those ages, with even the glass in the middle and a compartment to pass objects to the prisoners. They take trips to visit the boys so they can meet their sister and try to figure things out. Achenar, in his exile on Haven, had a change of heart and actually turned over a new leaf, horrified at the actions they took in their youth, and genuinely felt love for his little sister. Cyrus, on the other hand, never let go of his anger. He still didn't see an issue to his actions, and the existence of Yisha only added to his resentment, especially as he learned that Atrus was personally instructing her in the art. So he escaped, broke Achenar out, kidnapped Yisha, and sought to use the memory chamber in Serenia to extract her mind and replace it with his own, so that Atrus would teach him the art in her body. Afterwards, his plan was to kill his parents and return to his body, effectively killing Yisha as well. But he wasn't counting on Achenar becoming the hero of the story. Achenar warns the stranger, the player, that the Yisha we're about to release isn't really her, and tells us to go into the dream to help her reclaim her body. As for him, the whole thing takes place in an old version of the memory chamber, with an old plan that's already kinda dead. But Achenar has a stone that can help it keep it going, so we can do the thing and go to the dream. The problem is, that old plan, that kinda dead plant, is extremely poisonous. There's gases all around it. So he breaks into the room and subjects himself to the toxic fumes for as long as we need, and in the end, Yisha is saved. Sirius's mind is lost in the dream, effectively killing him, and Achenar succumbs to the poison. In the ending, we once again speak with Atrus, and this scene makes him look not just like a sociopath, but a truly awful parent. He says Catherine has taken Yisha away, and that she'll need some time. She truly loved her siblings. He then, very much with an oh well kind of attitude, says a door has closed that he tried very hard to always keep open, but that maybe it's a good thing. His sons are gone, but he still has his daughter. So he's very much saying for the longest time he's tried his best to keep caring about his sons, but now that they're gone, he doesn't have to do it anymore. After all, he still has a daughter. It could be a performance thing, or it could be a dialogue writing thing, or a combination of both, but it comes across horribly. And then we get to Myst V. Now, Myst V is weird. I have issues with the game, stemming from it changing a lot of the established rules, primarily having the characters in it link across ages without the use of books, touching symbols on their persons to just warp away. In fact, you move across ages by touching symbols on the stone slates you carry, which apparently is how the Borrow do their linking. The Borrow being the slave race that still serves the Dunny. Because Myst V is all about hammering the point that the Dunny are awful, and yet everyone involved in the game is fully invested in their resurgence. And this game has Yisha once more, now a much older Yisha, and one completely gone off the deep end. Obsessed with a prophecy of a figure known as the Grower. Someone meant to help the rebirth and regrowth of the Dunny, to help the metaphorical tree that represents the civilization to grow healthy and thrive. Only she once had the chance to fulfill her mission and release the Borrow from their enslavement by taking the big MacGuffin tablet of the game and giving it to them, in the Myst equivalent of giving Dobby a sock. But instead, like most Dunny, she went on full God mode and in the process lost access to the tablet. So now she needs you to go get it, and it's a good thing you're there because you're answering a call from Atrus to go help Yisha, who's become lost, in his words. And as I said, Myst V is a game dedicated to emphasizing how awful the Dunny are. Not just with the Borrow or with the ages you visit, but you even have another character, Escher, who's a Dunny survivor and who's truly awful. A perfect representation of everything that is wrong with this civilization. When you get to the end, the real ending, where you release the Barrow and link to Relation, the age Atrus wrote for the Dunny survivors, Atrus and Yisha reunite, and Atrus tells her he knew that she was indeed the grower, meaning that the person who put the damn prophecy in her head was likely her own father, meaning that yet again, Atrus managed to screw up one of his kids. He instilled in her his own obsession with the Dunny, with rebuilding them, and the whole ending is about how releasing the Barrow finally will give the Dunny a chance to start fresh, to start anew. The only one that seems to give a crap about the Barrow is Yisha. Atrus doesn't say a damn thing about them. He's delighted that we've helped her return to him as the grower, filled with the wisdom of the Maker, the Dunny god never before mentioned in any of the games, but that everyone talks about in Myst V. As if you're working on the last game of the series, you might as well do whatever you want with the canon and establish lore, I suppose. But again, he doesn't really seem to care that much about the Barrow. He has nothing to say about them in this big ending, nor has he ever. Sure, the Barrow we're introduced in Uru and Myst V continues, or very much retells that story, but if we take it all as one big canon, then Atrus comes off looking kinda bad. All focus on restoring the Dunny, but not even a little care about the entire race they kept enslaved. So, in the end, with all the events, all the drama, all the harrowing journeys across ages, and the many, many mistakes and crimes committed across the series, I can say for certain without a doubt that A, the Dunny suck, and B, Atrus is one of the worst parents in gaming history, and he's very much, if not directly, then indirectly responsible for everything. The good and the bad, but mostly just the bad. He tried to do better than his dad, but ended up doing far worse. Not as a writer of ages, but as a parent of children, and mentor to new generations. And we can all agree that's much worse. So to sum it up, Atrus sucks.